So I want to start by thanking Mike for pulling this together. Mike and Intermountain are also pro partners with us. We've had the pleasure of building a strong partnership with them over the last 6 years. And Mike's passionate commitment to ensuring healthcare is always on for quality patient care, it's evident when he speaks. I mean, most of these gentlemen need no introduction at all. So today's topic of right to repair is really, it's a top priority for our industry, and we are very proud to sponsor this session. So without further delay, I'm gonna pass it over to Mike. Thanks,
Great,
Mike.
Thank you. And thanks for sticking around and coming. I know the last session of the day, and if I stand up and stuff, I'm as David told me when he's up, I'm a wanderer. So I feel more comfortable standing and talking. Again, Mike Busdicker, I've been in the industry for over 40 years. I started off with the Air Force, graduated from the Air Force Biomed School in 1982, 83, and just a couple of years ago. So, and I currently serve on AAMI, Board of Directors for AAMI as well. And this is, she's the one that everybody really wants to see. This is Piper. Piper is my certified medical service dog. I am a combat veteran, in 2007 deployed to Iraq. And I got her from Loving Angel Service Dogs. She is a 4-year-old Labradoodle. And the reason that I put the second picture on there of her is because people look at her and go, Labradoodle, really? That is her full brother that's on that picture with her. So there were 8 puppies in the litter. She was the last one born. Everybody else got the doodle part. She got most of the lab, which I'm okay with. With that, I want to see if this thing works. Maybe I was, I gotta go back now. And I'm not going back. I must be pushing the wrong, but there we go. Real quick, as everybody, as Chris mentioned, the gentleman sitting up here on this stage really don't need much of an introduction. Dave Francoeur, nationally respected. Dave's been with a number of organizations, TKA, Sodexo, Crothel, Crest, Aramark, Trimedics, and has led, been in a leadership role and position with those organizations over the 10 years or so that he's been in the field as well. And you can see the picture of Dave there, but what he really loves, the other picture down there is him on his boat with one of his grandchildren. And that's what he really loves to do. So, see, I'm pushing the, dude, I'll get them going. Binsang, definitely don't need an introduction, right? From Binsang Wang, everybody knows Binsang. He's been in the field about 10 years as well. Vice President of Program Management with Sodexo, currently has also been around in a few different organizations and really has made a difference and an impact in the field and the industry as well. And if you don't know, Binsang is also an author. You can see that he tells lots of fish stories. The picture of him there on the cover of one of his books holding up one of the fish that Sully caught, not Binsang, but he claims, yeah. Anyways, love Binsang as well. I'll figure this out by the end of it. Alex Gideon, Chief Operating Officer at PartSource. The picture here that I've got of Alex, you can see number 49. That's Alex.
Where'd you find that?
I did a little bit of research and found out this guy played football for Harvard. So he was a Harvard football player. And not only did I find that out, but they called him the Secretary of Defense. Okay. So, yeah. Yep.
I mean, for all the avid Harvard football fans, there was a story on that wasn't about how well I played football.
Okay. Okay. We won't go there, or we won't go to the fact that your brother played for the Vikings and as well. So, yeah, I didn't. That's one of the things is I did some research that I didn't know about Alex, that he was a defensive player with Harvard, and actually in high school I think he was a quarterback.
Yeah, and kept getting demoted.
So, anyways, we'll jump right in, and I've asked them to put together some slides. I want to make sure that there's plenty of time for questions at the end of this. So when I asked them to send me a couple of slides and stuff, I ended up with 35 total. So I said, hey guys, kind of run through these slides if you can, 7 to 8 minutes, so we've got plenty of time for questions at the end. And we'll start off with Dave Francoeur. All right, this is the one to go.
Right?
Yep.
This one goes forward.
That one goes forward, yep.
Okay. As Mike said, thank you for allowing me to be here and tell you a little bit about, my goal is to tell you a little bit about how we got to here. So, so it started in 1996, probably started before that, but in 1996, the OEMs came and said, listen, we got a problem. And, you know, we're losing our market share to third parties and in-houses, and we don't like that. And so they went to the FDA, and the FDA said, wham, get over it. 2006, they tried it again. They actually went back to the FDA again, and they said, hey, we don't like the fact that we're losing money. The FDA said, wham, get over it. So 2016, here's where they got smart. They finally went back to the FDA, and they came back with something that really made a difference. They said, listen, people are getting affected by the fact that the wrong people are working on equipment. They're not trained, they're not educated, and you got to do something about it. Well, now they had to do something about it. So it got their attention. In 2016, they decided that they would actually do something about it, and they decided that the main focus was around effectiveness. So this is just a quick synopsis. 2016, they came out with the notice of request for comments. A lot of people in the room, a lot of your superiors, a lot of other people made comments and had things to do with it. October 2016, there were 400 plus of us that went to Washington, D.C. It was a 2-day conference. They had 400 people in the room. It was very much set up like this, to be honest with you. Pretty funny. This side over here, everybody wore suits, ties. They were with the OEMs. This side over here, people like Binsing, you know, jeans, t-shirts, whatever. But it was a different scenario. But we were on the not OEM side. It was a grueling 2 days, and there were so many people that were extra. They had rooms throughout the building with TVs and monitors and things, trying to give them insight as well. They had the FDA report came out on the safety effectiveness in October 2018. They came out with the definitions around the remanufacturing. December 2018, they brought 100 of us together in a room in Washington for 2 days. Very interesting situation. We had OEMs, we had ISOs, we had parts manufacturers, we had all kinds of people in the room. They made us go through different scenarios as to what we would do. From that came the collaborative community, where we came up with what was then the Medical Device Servicing Collaborative Community. They dropped the collaborative, and I'll explain that in a little bit, but that's how that worked. From there, they came out with the initiatives around, this is where they got the resources. They had public workshops, stakeholders, effective evidence, and the adverse outcomes. Tried to keep it to 7 minutes. So the FDA's intended actions were, you know, around the management principles, clarifying the servicing of remanufacturing or servicing, straighten security and the data device servicing, and then foster evidence develop with servicing outcomes. You know, at the end of the day, like I said, it's really about, they wanted to have a collaborative effort, and they actually deemed us as a collaborative effort. And then they actually have a complete thing around what it truly means to be a collaborative effort. You have to go through an application process and do a vetting process for them to actually deem you as a collaborative effort. And Carol Davis Smith, as I look in the back of the room, we worked hard to try to get there, never really got there, got pretty close. So then it really, the greatest thing that everybody in this room needs to be aware of, and is a real value, which we probably all know, but I'll just remind you, is the coolest thing in the world was they basically said there really is no discernible difference between a manufacturer serving a piece of equipment and a third party servicing a piece of medical equipment, which really gave us a huge platform. They gave us an olive branch as far as I was concerned, in terms of us being able to continue to do what we're doing without any issues. And the nice thing was they had to do something, and they came back and they said that really all the energy and spin up around it was around the remanufacturing side. And so they got into that. And so it was really pretty cool. So the conclusions: currently available objective evidence does not support additional burdensome regulation at this time. And there's no current need for servicing regulations. So, I mean, again, from my perspective, it really did well for us as an industry. And we continued for well over 9 years to do the medical device servicing community. It's kind of defunct at this point, but something needs to be done. But I think we're in a pretty good space, but I guarantee they're not over it. So this is the definition that they came out with. If you haven't seen it, this is literally the definition. And to be deemed as a remanufacturer, it's pretty succinct. And most of us don't fall in that category. And if you do, it means you have further things to demonstrate. I think the biggest thing that came out of it for all of us is they pretty much never came out and said it was a mandate 1345, but they really intimated strongly that we should have QMS systems and in line with what would be considered the 13485 initiatives. And I believe that's it for me. Thank you. And just how'd I do?
Great, great.
I think I kept it to the same.
I think you did great.
Okay, thank you, folks. Mike, for the invitation and the audience for participating. I was asked by Mike to talk a little bit about the Alliance because it is something that's, I guess, not everyone here knows, but I want to make sure you understand I'm not speaking as a representative of the Alliance. I am just a member of the Alliance on behalf of Sodexo. So be careful that I'm not trying to be an official representative. I'm going to make a few remarks about the recent developments in the area. Some of that Dave already covered. And then compare us to some other countries around the world in terms of what they have been doing. Okay, first, Alliance. All this is available from the website, so I'm not going to read everything. And also, obviously, you have the slides at your disposal afterwards. But basically, it's a group of large independent service organizations that are mostly hospital-based service organizations, TriMedic, Sodexo, Agility, Croton. And also we have a few affiliated members that you probably saw here in the show, Advantech, Elite Biomedical Solutions. And our website is shown here, and our mission is try to defend the presence of the independent service organizations in this conversation about right to repair. We have published quite a few white papers, again, available on the website for you to go and access. We made comments on the FDA papers, on the cybersecurity issues that, as you folks know, apply to not just independent service organizations, but the CHTM community as a whole, and also the remanufacturing guidance that FDA wrote, etc. Okay, so moving ahead, there are a few fairly recent developments that I think you folks may want to be refreshed in terms of memory. Is the Library of Congress copyright exemption, the state efforts in right to repair, and then the remanufacturing final guidance that was issued last year, and the AdvaMed action on the right to repair provision in the NDAA. I'm going to explain what that is. So first, the US Copyright Office, which is part of the Library of Congress, believe it or not, issued a document saying basically it is legitimate to, quote, invade into the copyright protection of the software that the manufacturers have built into devices if you are accessing that solely for the purpose of maintenance. So if there is a keyword or key code or whatever it is necessary, you can find a way to bypass that and get access to that, and that's not considered a violation of the copyright law. Second thing that you folks probably have heard is that many states have either passed or is considering right to repair laws covering a number of mostly consumer products as well as farm equipment. But one state, particularly Colorado, back in 2022, passed a right to repair law specifically for powered wheelchairs. That was a very extensive lobbying made by the fellows who depend basically on power wheelchairs to get permission to repair their own power wheelchairs or get someone else who is not a manufacturer, because as you can imagine, if it takes several days for them to get repairs, it can be a really difficult. And then Tennessee and California also passed something about power wheelchairs, but with more restrictions. Vermont is considering a right to repair bill for medical devices, but it has not been voted yet. And Nevada is considering also a right to repair bill for power wheelchairs. But back in 2022, California had a specific bill for medical devices in general, and that bill passed unanimously at the Health Committee of the Assembly. We're in California here, but disappeared in the Finance Committee. So I'll let you guys guess what happened. Okay. The remanufacturing guidance was topic that Wayne covered just in the previous session, so I'm not going to read all the details. But there is a significant concern that remains, is that the extensive so-called analysis, whether the flow chart that FDA wants the independent service organization to perform after every single repair, whether that was a real service only or is a remanufacturing, in our view, it's a significant pressure to the healthcare organizations because of the downtime that it will imply, because we don't typically have a technician and a supervisor following the technician to repair every piece of medical equipment out there. And also the great variety of medical equipment that's out there makes us really very concerned about the possibility of us write down every single details of repairs. We are not talking about PMs, remember, we're talking repairs. Every single device may have just one PM procedure, but may have dozens, if not hundreds of corrective maintenance procedures. Okay, so it's resource intensive. I've made some back of the envelope calculations, and basically a typical 400-bed hospitals will need additional 1.5 FTE just to cover this particular aspect. Of course, this final guidance applies only to independent service organizations. They have exempted the in-house HTM departments, exempted the military personnel, hospital DOD, as well as VA. Okay, so it seems that they are indicating that those elected officials who go to Walter Reed to be treated can just get harmed, died. Who cares about them, right? There's no mandate for the manufacturer to release device specifications, service material. Wayne said, well, you can reverse engineering most of the things. Yeah, if you want to try to reverse engineering a cover for the transducer or the glue, etc. Now, I would like to dare someone to reverse engineering an embedded software. That's, I think, a little bit challenging. Not even ChatGPT, I think, will be able to do that. Okay, this one I think is more interesting. Recently, we had, late last year, an intervention by AAMIF on the National Defense Authorization Act. Question for folks here, please raise your hands. Who was trained by our military as a BMAT? Air Force, Navy, etc., etc. Okay, who here has served as an active military person? Okay, so what if you are in the service, either as just a service person or as a technician supporting the equipment that is needed to revive or support the life of a combat zone soldier battleground? But what are you going to do if you don't have access to the right information? Do you want to call from Afghanistan, North Korea? Uh, 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 can you please give me the access code? Can you give me the service instruction? Can you send the service personnel to Iraq? What are we talking about? We are putting our young people at jeopardy because these people lobbied the Congress when they passed the National Defense Authorization Act, which is basically our Pentagon budget. Okay, there was a provision for right to repair there, and they killed it, and they are bragging about it. Is that what we are really trying to do here? Again, as I said, you may not care about those elected officials who get treated at Walter Reed, but come on, our young people, your relatives, yourselves, etc., go to combat zone and then they cannot get proper support. This is getting a little bit ridiculous. And then some of these people say they are not properly trained, qualified. Do you think that our Department of Defense don't train people properly to support medical equipment that is used for the soldiers out there? Come on, guys. Let's be real. This is, in my opinion, a disgrace. We need to stop this kind of things. Yeah, there is a limit. We should not exceed certain things. That's fine. But when there is a situation that is really putting people's life at jeopardy, we need to be reasonable. Okay, you folks remember during the COVID, even some very reluctant manufacturers say, okay, we are going to let you fix ventilators, etc., because we know that people's life were at jeopardy. And now they have retracted. So please think about it. This is, I think, a little too much. And to make things even more interesting, the European Union has a law called Medical Device Directive since 1993, and then reaffirmed in 2017 that service material must be provided by the manufacturers. So are we still a colony of the British Empire? Are we still native Indians? We don't deserve respect like the Europeans have? What's going on here? Why they have that when we don't? Okay. Japan has 30 to 40,000 licensed clinical engineers who not only maintain life support equipment, they operate life support equipment, ventilators, hemodialysis, bypass machines, etc., etc. They are routinely trained by the manufacturers to operate those machines as well as maintaining those machines. They don't get refusal from the manufacturers there to, no, sorry, I cannot give you service manuals. Quite the opposite, they get trained to do that, okay? And those clinical engineers are licensed by the government of Japan. Okay, so how can you help? Bottom line here is that the issue here is really money, as they've said. We need to work together. And again, I'm not saying this is totally arbitrary, free for all. No, everyone is responsible for what they do. And that's why we have liability laws, etc. And we need to do the right things, and even to the point of figuring out people who are not doing the right things. Okay, this is important. I'm probably the oldest person here, but I'm sorry to say that sooner or later, you guys are going to be patients too, okay? So we need to push the Congress to have this thing because we have had a lot of challenges, and this is not about independent service organizations. This is about the entire HTM community and the entire population of the United States that need proper care. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, you can skip through that one,
All
the
right.
next one. Yeah, this has been saying it's not my fault. My wife did it, which is
Oh.
actually a true story. So you can
It's
go
not a
back.
story. It's a newspaper
Right.
expose.
Great. Well, if I knew you were gonna put up my football picture, I would have done some push-ups before this. Because most of the time people say, well, what did you weigh when you played then? And unfortunately, it's still the similar weight. It's just carried differently. Thanks for having us here. I thought what might be helpful is just to spend 30 seconds on what PartSource does, because it helps then inform the questions that Mike asked that we speak today, which is what's our perspective on right to repair, and how do we use data and evidence to help drive transparency on performance across the supply chain. So our mission at PartSource is to ensure healthcare is always on, and we do that by partnering with in-house teams and service providers to enable the procurement of resources needed to keep medical equipment up and running. Today, we support 15,000 different clinical sites across the US. We partner with 5,000 different suppliers to provide those resources, and we enable just under 1 million service events on medical equipment in the US a year. What I thought might be a good place to start is we talk often at the company about start with the end of the story and then right backwards, that it creates a lot of clarity. Our first principle perspective here is that we should think about what outcomes do we want. I think when you talk about the outcomes that we want for consumers of healthcare in the US, patients in the US, and taxpayers, it's surprisingly not controversial. We want safe and effective equipment. We want that equipment to be available to perform procedures, and we want to do that as cost effectively and with as little waste as possible. And collectively, we spend somewhere on the order of $15 to $20 billion a year to do that with people, processes, and systems. And I think we can probably all agree that there's a lot of room for improvement. I had an example recently. We had a family member diagnosed with cancer, and post-biopsy, it took 3 weeks to get in for an MRI. And that might even be quick. And you put yourself in the shoes, we've all been of a patient who's just thinking about the information they're going to get. And so it's really important. It's really important we get this right. Our perspective is not a dogmatic one of the OEM's always the best option or a third-party service provider is always the best option. Our perspective and what I believe firmly is that it should be based on the evidence. It should be based on the performance data, meritocratic system for the equipment, for the circumstances, for the modality and location where it needs to occur. And you can ask a question of, well, how come that's not what's happening? I think if you look at most functioning markets, in our economy that have little waste, that perform really well, the common foundation is that there is transparency, and that transparency drives competition. And what this page shows is the reason it doesn't happen is because there's a lack of transparency and there's incredible complexity in the supply chain today. We sit at an interesting nexus because we partner with all the in-house teams and service providers, and we partner with the suppliers. And from that, we've gathered a 20-year longitudinal record of data on performance. And that performance data is really helpful because you can step back and say, hey, what are the outcomes? And based on those outcomes, what's the best service strategy for my situation? The challenging part is that gathering all that data is really hard. And today as an industry, I think my observation is that we often try to do that individually. We often try to do that for our own organization, for our own site, for our own team. and the infrastructure required to gather quality data, to gather compliance data, to gather cost data, reliability data regularly across parts, across services, across in-house performance, takes a lot of infrastructure investment and refinement. And we've really spent our time as a company over the past 20 years investing there. And I think having that corpus of data across all of our organizations gives us a super powerful way to articulate what the what's at stake here if we don't do this right, because we can see what the outcomes are when it's done well and not, and also the justification to have a much more constructive approach on right to repair. So how do we do it, and what information do we gather on suppliers, and how do we use that to inform the right supply chain approach? Every step of the way, from the time that a part's identified, a service vendor or service needs identified, time it's fulfilled, we're tracking hundreds of points of data. We're tracking things around quality outcomes that are reported by customers. We're tracking things around reliability, on-time shipment, on-time arrival, efficacy, fix rates, mean time to failure, and then cost. And all of that comes back and is appended around both the individual instance and the supplier. And so we get a universal perspective on like-for-like service events, like-for-like parts procurement, on how folks perform. As I mentioned, that takes a lot of infrastructure. We have a pretty comprehensive team of folks that are driving our QMS process. We've invested over $100 million in technology to be able to aggregate that and make it accessible in real time to inform purchasing decisions. And what I wanted to share just for a minute is, so what does that underlying data look like? And as you think about how do we build the argument for a transparent, a meritocratic, and evidence-based way to drive your service strategy, that isn't about, is the OEM, is it a third party, but what is the right strategy for me, for my asset, in my location, in my situation, to drive the best clinical and safety outcome, increase uptime, and do that in the most efficient way possible. We think it's about quality. We think it's about reliability, performance over a longitudinal period of time, because consistency really matters. And then importantly, things on here around customer feedback, because sometimes there's not things that you can consistently measure in an objective way, but every event that we have, customers score that on their satisfaction, and we're able to incorporate that as well. And what I would tell you is, broadly across those millions of events, what we see is consistent with what the FDA report said in 2018, which is that there's no significant difference. And it really is dependent on the facts and circumstances of each service event. The final thing I'll say here is, like, doing that anecdotally is really challenging. And so I think a big opportunity for us as an industry are to find ways to build in those decisions in a scalable and repeatable way. And the only way I think to do that is through technology that doesn't require individuals to have to make decisions without the benefit of all that information. What's shown here is a tool that we've built that allows what we call formulary rules, but take that information, take that evidence, and then configure the decisions that are made across a large-scale, complex organization, so that you can ensure that the right service strategy is deployed every time. And to me, that vision of let's empower the right service strategy, whether it's OEM or a third-party provider, to keep assets safe, to keep them up, to care for folks like my family member that would have loved to be in the next day for MNRI, and to do that in the most cost-effective way so that we can actually bend the curve of healthcare, is a vision that I think is much, much more compelling than the counter one that Bissing and Dave and Mike laid out.
Okay, so I wanted to give you an idea with the three panelists that we have here. Where did it start? How has it progressed? What were the findings? As well as, what do we have out there from a quality management and quality system of organizations that are providing parts or maybe providing service, and how do they go about doing those things, as well as with Ben saying, what's going on right now in the industry? What are the latest developments? How many people knew about the alliance of the independent service organizations out there? I don't think many of us or many people knew about that and what they were doing and what they do, as well as what's happening in other countries, what's going on there. So really, some of my final thoughts to consider, and I'll just jump through real quick on a couple of things. One of them is that the number of medical device servicing companies out there that either provide service or parts, in the FDA report, when we read through it, when I look at it, it concerns me that Dun & Bradstreet says there's 4,700 companies out there, but ECRI does research on it, and other organizations said, no, there's somewhere between 15,000 and 21,000. That's a huge gap between Dun & Bradstreet and those numbers, and a huge gap by ECRI. And it's because we've got servicing organizations and parts providers out there that are not required to register with the FDA. You can start your own business, fire it up, and say, I provide parts, and I go out and I pull parts from X-ray machines, put them on a shelf, and then I sell them to organizations that need those parts. There's no quality measurement system on there like what PartSource does. They vet those suppliers out, they take a look at them, they make sure that the parts are being provided are going to be safe, effective, and get that equipment back up and running as it should be. So that's kind of what I wanted you to see. I'm not going to ask these guys the questions, because what I want is for you to ask the questions. And what I would ask is, because we're limited on, we got about 15 minutes or so. And what I would ask is that we don't, I'm not looking for comments on right to repair and those types of things, but what I'm looking for is, if you have questions on right to repair, on what's going on, what started, where we need to be, what do we need to get involved, how can we become involved, or what do we do to really ensure that we've got those quality systems, parts, service, and everything out there. That's what I would ask, is for you to ask those questions. So fire them off.